I've been building my own kingdom for everyone to see. It exists to keep me safe from harm, and it's intact to glorify me. Nobody helped me build this up. It was me and me alone. I've appointed myself as the king, and I've given myself the throne. But it turns out I'm no ruler, and I have no control. So I have decided to destroy it all. I'm tearing down the walls, kicking down the doors. Everything inside this kingdom is yours. 'Cause what I've made is worthless, and it cannot stand. Come and breathe some life into my empty, cold, dead hands. Down with the fickle king, away with this fantasy. You are the one I need. Death to the kingdom of me. Death to the kingdom of me. I should probably be frightened. This empire's all I know, but it always does more damage than good. I'm afraid it's gotta go. I know that I can't be trusted, 'cause I'm just a man. And if you hadn't given your life for me, a loser would be all that I am. You know they say just follow your heart. I'm afraid that's a load of trash. Your heart will take you down to deep, dark places where you feel like you'll never come back. So I'm coming out of the dark. This facade is I woke up feeling like it was time to tighten up. Yeah, I woke up feeling like it might be a good day to get it done. That's right. Oh, the stadium is just like my second house. Now I'm two-tone talking, they can't shut my mouth. I woke up feeling like it was time to tighten up. Yeah, 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 yeah. I woke up feeling like it was time to tighten up. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Two-Tone Talk by God Pod, episode 94. Good to see you today. Tighten up, everybody, as we are barreling through week 2, or barreling toward, I should say, week 2 of preseason football. The Tennessee Titans and the Seattle Seahawks. They've been having them a couple of joint practices this week. And it's barreling toward Saturday night, tomorrow night, where they will play. And at least for Tennessee, Brian Callahan says no starters. No starters expected. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, we're going to recap the joint practices. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure, if you're watching on YouTube, to like and sub and talk to me in the comments. And if you're listening on Spotify or SoundCloud, I appreciate you as well. Leave me positive reviews. That helps me there as well. So, Two-Tone Talk Podcast, Tennessee Titans, Seattle Seahawks. Let me tell you what we're not going to talk about today, and that is Brandon Ayuk.
I mean, that has nothing to do with anything. I just want to say I'm sick of hearing about it. Do whatever you're going to do. Stay with the 49ers. Go to the Steelers, whatever it's going to be. I'm sick of the back and forth. Also, a couple of big signings by the Atlanta Falcons. Justin Simmons. Also, Matthew Judon. Couple of big signings for that Falcons defense. Justin Simmons was a guy that the Titans were talking about. It was rumored to get at that safety position. Ultimately ended up going with Quandre Diggs. We've got a person in the chat who says they are a Jags fan. Oh my goodness, we got a Jags fan in the house. So they love the channel. Appreciate you tuning in on behalf of your Jacksonville Jaguars. So let's talk about these joint practices. Titans Seahawks had joint practices Wednesday and Thursday. And joint practices are weird to me. I get the benefit of them, but it's also kind of weird because I just have so many questions about joint practices. Like, obviously, there's no film. There's no time to study the opponent. You're just going out there and I guess doing what you would do in a normal practice against another team. It's like, why not just do this in a preseason game? I've never quite understood, if you're going to go through all of this, why not just, I guess in practice you can make sure that they're put in certain situations, I guess, but it is tough because as fans, we have to rely on video clips and reports coming out of practice to try and base an opinion on what's going on. And I put out on the Two Tone Talk Twitter, _podcast. Go follow me. I put on there. It's hard to take it seriously when you have a bunch of fans, not just Titans and Seahawks. I mean, there are teams all over the league having these joint practices either this week or maybe they did it last week or next week. You have fans trying to figure out who won, which team won the joint practices, and we're all trying to figure it out, and none of us even saw the practice. We don't even know. We don't even know what all happened. We see certain clips. We see certain reports. And who knows? Who knows? I mean, how much stock to put into it? I don't know. But I'm going to just go based on the reports we've gotten and some of the clips that we've seen, some of the talking points for Tennessee coming out of these two joint practices against Seattle. Here are some things that stood out for the good and for the bad. Let's start with Will Levis. Will apparently struggled. He struggled against the Seahawks. We know Mike McDonald, the new coach there for Seattle, defensive-minded head coach who did a great job in Baltimore, and now he's brought that to Seattle, so I expect that they will have a pretty good defense. But Will Levis struggled. Had a couple of interceptions, had a couple of just mistimed plays, missing open guys, namely Calvin Ridley. The reports are that the connection between Levis and Ridley was just missing. They were trying to get him the ball, but, whether he was missing him when he was open or whether Calvin couldn't get open. And we saw now in the clips and one-on-ones, Seattle had some corners who were performing very well against Calvin in the one-on-one drills. Calvin had a couple of good reps. They had a couple. I mean, it's one of those things where the Seattle fans are posting the clips of the corner playing really well against Calvin and saying, yeah, we shut Calvin down. But then the Titans fans are showing the clips of Calvin getting in good reps against the guy. And it's like, yeah, Calvin's our guy. So it's what I'm saying. It's hard to even get a good grasp on what's going on in these practices. But apparently the general idea is that Will Levis did struggle. Had some red zone stuff where they were doing red zone stuff, and I think he threw an interception on the first play. And when it comes to stuff like that, you're going to have two groups of people. You're going to have people who overthink it way too much and panic. You're going to have people who declare that he's not good and he's not going to be good and the ship is sinking and everybody get on the lifeboat because it's bad news coming. You have those people, and then you have the people who insist that it's no big deal at all. We shouldn't even care. It means nothing. I need some common sense people to join me somewhere in the middle of that. No, it's not the end of the world. No, it's not, the Titanic is sinking and the violinists are playing and everything's a disaster. I don't believe that. But I'm also not going to sit here and say, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to say it's a huge deal, but it's not nothing. It needs to be addressed. I would rather it happen in these joint practices than in an actual game. And like I said, I don't know. Obviously, there's no film study that goes into this. Obviously, maybe you're willing to try things in practice that you wouldn't in a game. I don't know. But one thing I will say, it's not nothing. He needs to figure it out. Okay, because I've said it time and time again, this team's going to live and die with him. They've got enough talent around him. He's going to have his chance to prove he's that guy. And he's going to have to do better than he did in these joint practices. And I'm not saying he won't. I'm not saying he's not capable of it, because I believe he is. I'm not saying it's the end of the world. But let's not just say it's nothing. I mean, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be rectified by the time week 1 against Chicago gets here. As far as Calvin and his comments that he made about, I wasn't running full speed. I wasn't running, I don't really care. Some people are going to read too much into it, but I didn't really give it a second thought. To me, that was him talking to reporters, just trying to give an explanation why things didn't go great that day. And that was the first thing he could think of. I mean, you know how these guys are talking to the media. They don't want to do it, right? But Will Levis struggled, Calvin Ridley. Let's talk about a couple of guys who didn't struggle. The first one, Jaquan Jackson. I'm telling you, this battle between Jaquan Jackson and Kearis Jackson to see who's going to make the roster, Brian Callahan seems adamant that 6 wide receivers are going to be on the roster. So it would theoretically stand to reason that that 6th spot is either going to go to Kearis Jackson or Jaquan Jackson. Kearis obviously had the beautiful kick return against San Francisco in the preseason game last week. He did some good things. Kearis had a good week too. If you saw some of his clips from one-on-one drills, he was doing really well. And then you have Jaquan Jackson, who had a long touchdown reception against Seattle in one of these joint practices. He's very fast. Had a nice punt return last week as well. And if you can only keep one of these guys, man, I don't know. I don't know who you keep, because they're both performing really well. And if they're both performing that well, can we not just take 7 wide receivers, put them both back there for the new kick return, and either one of them can play wide receiver if we need them to. I mean, if they're both doing well, if they're both performing well, isn't that a good problem to have, that you have 2 guys who are up for the same spot and they're both awesome, and they're both performing awesome? Why not just take them both? I mean, I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Jaquan Jackson, obviously, he shined in these practices against Seattle, as did Kearis. Jaquan probably, I give the edge to Jaquan a little bit, I think. He had the long touchdown, whereas Kearis appeared to be doing really well in one-on-one drills. Treylon Burks, what a big opportunity for him, because DeAndre's not practicing right now. Tyler Boyd's not practicing right now. And Treylon apparently had some good practices against Seattle. And, man, I hope, I really do hope that Treylon figures it out, because physically he looks bigger, he looks stronger. Of course, he looks very fast. He's going to get his chance, I believe. And he looked to be, I think you could say, of all the wide receivers the Titans had out there in these joint practices, Treylon probably performed the best. I'm not saying that Treylon should be wide receiver 1, okay? Don't take that out of context. But Treylon probably was the best performing wide receiver the Titans had in these joint practices against Seattle. He's going to have his opportunities, because they're going to have to account for Calvin. They're going to have to account for Hopkins. They're going to have to account for Boyd. And Treylon Burks should have his opportunities if he can stay on the field, which brings me to this. Because on Wednesday, Treylon had a point in practice where he went down. And the report came out that Treylon went down, he's grabbing his leg, and everybody freaked out, including myself. And then J.C. Latham, the left tackle, kind of had the same thing happen to him, and it was like everybody was going nuts. Oh, God, here we go. And it ended up just being cramps for both guys. Nothing major, just basic cramping, and they were back out there the next day. But it did speak volumes about what us Titans fans are used to. I mean, with injuries these last few years, we're pretty much just waiting on somebody to go down and somebody to have some season-ending thing. But for right now, Treylon's good. I think the most extensive injury we've had is Marlon Davidson, the defensive tackle. I think that he's got a pretty significant injury with a bicep, I believe. But other than that, and I don't want to downplay that. I hate that he's hurt. But Treylon and JC, it was just cramps. Listen, Treylon, I don't know if he's playing tomorrow night. We're going to preview the game here in a little bit. But I think that Treylon obviously showed a lot of promise in these practices. He's a lock for the main roster. Absolutely. Nathan says that according to Paul Kaharski, Marlon Davidson is done for the year. So there you go. Be looking for the Titans to sign a depth piece for the defensive line here very soon. Kyle Phillips. It's funny because right when I said his name, somebody in the chat said, I say we cut Phillips. I think Kyle Phillips has a hamstring injury. He's not making the roster. I mean, you know, the odds were that he wasn't going to make the roster anyway with all these new additions at wide receiver. But then clips came out of him in training camp, and he looked good, and he looked fast, and he was doing some good things, and it got people talking like, what do you do with Kyle if he ain't making the, I mean, if he's got another injury that's going to keep him out, that pretty much seals it for him. He's not making the roster. Probably going to end up being a practice squad guy. Ultimately, right now, I would give Mason Kinsey the edge over Kyle Phillips because Mason appears to be more durable. And, you know, Mason Kinsey had some nice plays. Mason Kinsey's going to be a guy that has a lot of opportunity tomorrow night with starters out. Mason Kinsey's going to have a lot of opportunity to do some good things. But Kyle Phillips, I think his fate is sealed. He is not. I mean, it was already a long shot anyway, but especially with the hamstring injury, I mean, the guy just cannot stay healthy, and I hate it for him. But again, offensively, you talk about the offensive line. According to the reports that came out, I mean, the offensive line held up okay. They struggled some, but, you know, I didn't hear anything disastrous about the offensive line. I didn't hear anything coming out of these joint practices that was like the offensive line's just awful. I didn't hear they were doing great either, but I think, you know, they were fine, I would assume. Like I said, none of us saw the practice in its entirety. Anything we did see was mainly wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, things like that. But, you know, in terms of offensive line, we didn't see too much. But I assume they did at least okay. Let's go to the defense and what we heard about them in these joint practices. Had some struggles in the secondary. But, you know, it's hard to get a good grasp on what exactly the Titans secondary even is without L'Jarius Sneed and Cheeto Awuzie out there. I mean, it's really hard. And Quandre Diggs just got here. He's got to find his place. Jamal Adams, we pretty much have the NFL version of Patrick Beverly with Jamal Adams because apparently he's just running his mouth constantly. But secondary struggled, but we had our two best corners not in there. You know, Cheeto Awuzie appears, you know, he's got a bruised foot. So, I mean, I think it's a precautionary thing. No, wait a minute. That's Tyler Boyd. Is it Boyd or is it Awuzie? One of them has a bruised foot. Either way, I think it's all precautionary. Same with Sneed. So without the starting corners in there, it's hard to get a good idea. The secondary that was in there, yes, they struggled. which was probably Trey Avery, which was probably Jarvis Brownlee, which was I do watch basketball. I got a Kobe jersey back here. I'm a big Lakers fan. Don't come for me. Boyd has the bruised foot. Okay. But it's hard to get a good handle on that secondary because the starters aren't in there. Big Jeff. I'm sure you've all seen the clip of him just, I don't know any other word other than manhandle this poor center for Seattle. I don't know if it's a center or a guard or what. If you haven't seen the clip, you need to go find the clip of Big Jeff grabbing this 300-something pound man and just tossing him to the side like a small child. I mean, grabbed him, not even just pushed him. If you haven't seen the clip, I'm not talking about picked him up and just kind of moved him and went through him. No, he grabbed this 300-something pound man and just Incredible Hulked him. You know that scene in one of the Avengers movies where the Incredible Hulk takes the guy and is just slamming him back and forth over his head? You see it in a meme a lot. It was similar to that. Like, unbelievable. If you are that guy for Seattle, you got to just go sit in a small room and reassess your career at that point. So yeah, that was a highlight coming out. That was like a one-on-one drill or something. But man, if he's playing like that, Laken Tomlinson was the guy's name for Seattle. If he's playing like that, and T'Vondre Sweat and his big self can get in there and do his thing, that could just be nasty. I'm still waiting on a official ruling on the Arden Key thing, by the way. Has anybody heard anything from Roger Goodell or the NFL about the Arden Key thing? I sure haven't. But yeah, Big Jeff just chunked him. Chance Campbell, apparently, I mean, he had an interception, did some good things. He's gonna keep coming on strong, I guess, after his solid performance last week against San Francisco. Amani Hooker had a nice interception. Josh Wiley, going back to offense, Josh Wiley, I know they were worried about him having a concussion, but one thing I want to say, I know we're talking about defense here, but I want to go back to offense real quick. Where is Chigo Okonkwo? Is this guy still on the team? I have not heard one thing. I haven't seen a clip of him. I haven't seen pictures of him. Haven't heard a report about him. I haven't seen any reports that are like, oh yeah, Chigo Okonkwo made this nice play. But I haven't heard anything. Is this guy there? I've seen Josh Wiley. I have not seen anything from Chigo Okonkwo. Where is this guy? I hope that's not an omen for what kind of season he's going to have. Goodness gracious. One other thing I want to note before we get into the preview for tomorrow night. It is very refreshing that Brian Callahan, new head coach of this team, is very honest, in my opinion, with the media. And maybe we're just so used to the bare minimum with Vrabel. But Brian Callahan really doesn't leave anything up for speculation most of the time. The day that Burks and Latham went down with a cramp and everybody was worried that it was something worse, he immediately was like, they're fine. They were cramping. It's nothing major. Vrabel would have drugged that out. Vrabel would have been like, we'll see. We're waiting on reports. Like, he would have drugged that out. Callahan put it to rest immediately. Another thing was Paul Koharski kind of tried to nudge Brian Callahan in the direction of making a comment about Calvin Ridley and some comments that Calvin had made. I mentioned them earlier, where Calvin said he wasn't running hard on some of his routes. And Paul brought that up to Brian Callahan in the press conference to try to get Brian to say something about it. And I thought Brian Callahan handled that extremely well. Pretty much was just like, hey, I really, said, hey, when I was in Cincinnati and we got Jamar Chase, everybody was saying he was going to be a bust because he was dropping a couple balls in practice. The connection between him and Burrow wasn't exactly there in the practices leading up to his rookie season. And everybody thought, and I remember that. People were posting clips of Jamar Chase saying he was a bust. And obviously that ended up not being the case. He also talked about Jerry Rice. He said, I remember there were people that based on what he was doing in practice, people thought Jerry Rice was going to be a bum. And obviously he ended up being the greatest wide receiver of all time. And so I loved how quickly, because Vrabel was the type to just get ticked off and would kind of create a little bit of speculation among the fans as to like, is Vrabel mad at Calvin? Is Vrabel mad with this player? Is Vrabel mad at Julio? Is Vrabel mad at Ryan Tannehill? Is Vrabel mad? Vrabel always carried this chip on his shoulder like he was just ticked off. Whereas Brian Callahan just had a very eloquent, good response. And I'm not dogging out Vrabel. I mean, it's just different philosophies. But after having Vrabel for all these years, it was nice to have a guy who was just like, no, I'm not taking the bait. Like, it's fine. No problem. So I like that. It's refreshing. Somebody said, Memphis Grizz for Life said, do you remember the press conference when Vrabel said it effing sucks to lose? That was actually one of my more favorite Vrabel moments because I thought that was one of his most honest, raw moments with the media because I believed that. I believed that he meant what he said. But I like Callahan, his very calm response. And I just like, we mentioned Boyd earlier. Somebody asked about Tyler Boyd and why he hadn't been out there. And it was just like, hey, he has a bruised foot. It's a precautionary thing. He just answers questions and gets on to the next thing. Doesn't seem too panicked about anything, but gives the time of day to answer questions. I know it's still the honeymoon period right now, but it has been a breath of fresh air to have a coach that just doesn't seem like he wants to withhold information. Even the Will Levis mayonnaise cologne commercial, I don't think that would have happened under Vrabel, and people are out of their mind saying it's going to be a distraction and stuff like that. It's mayonnaise. Like, come on. All right, let's preview tomorrow night. Starters are not playing, according to Brian Callahan. Again, another just honest, like, hey, starters aren't playing, Malik's starting. So with the starters out, let's talk about what to look for in this game with the guys that are going to be in there. Obviously, the first thing I'm going to say is Malik Willis. Malik getting the start. I'm sure he'll play most of the game. Mason Rudolph might get a little bit of time at the end. But Malik's getting the start, and what an opportunity for him. He came in and looked better in camp than people thought. He had been an afterthought, and then he came in and didn't do anything horrible against San Francisco when he got in there. And now he's going to have an opportunity for most of the game to show what he can do. And this is his chance. I mean, the spotlight is on for him. I've said in the past, I don't think it's going to happen, but if he were to do something great and prove that he's good enough, they might take 3 quarterbacks to the roster. I don't think they're going to. I don't think he's going to jump Rudolph. But listen, if he can go out there and play really well tomorrow night, it can get interesting. So I'm excited for him. I'm excited to watch him tomorrow night. I hope I don't have the hiccups right now. If I sound out of breath, it's because I'm trying not to get the hiccups. Malik Willis, I'm excited for him. I'm excited to watch him. And I agree with C. Russ in the chat. I do not think they are going to take 3 quarterbacks to the roster. But if Malik can do well enough, at least he can lock up a practice squad spot and be in position because, he is a tremendous athlete and there might still be something there. So I'm excited for Malik. I'm excited to watch Malik tomorrow night. Other than that, listen, if there is a spot on this offensive line that really still feels up for grabs, it is the right guard position. I know Dylan Radins is probably the leading candidate right now, but this Andrew Rupkich, listen, apparently this guy's been doing really well. Did really well according to Callahan. He did really well in the preseason game when he got in there. He had a good camp, had a good week of practice. I think this guy is still making that right guard position interesting. And you talk about, young guys, he's only 25 years old. So there's a lot of possibilities there. I think that's going to be a 2-man race. for that right guard position. Maybe you could argue Daniel Brunskill, but I think he's in more of like a backup center role. But I still think that right guard position's up for grabs. The right tackle, I feel like NPF has that locked down. I don't really see anybody else emerging as a um, viable option other than NPF, but we'll see. I think the right guard position is the main one that feels like it is still up for grabs between Radens and Rupkic. So we'll see. I'm sure Rupkic will get a lot of time tomorrow night. And I mean, if it were me, I would probably let Radens play tomorrow night just to get a look. You need to get as many looks at both of those guys as you can. I know he said no starters, but I'd put MPF in there for a little bit too, because I mean, you need him. I mean, really, they all need to prove themselves. So I mean, you really could put Latham and Skoronski too. But I mean, that left side's pretty much locked down. Also on offense, I'm looking for that running back 3 battle between Chestnut and Haskins. I feel like that's kind of at a deadlock right now, maybe with Chestnut having a little bit of the edge. So that's going to be interesting. Haskins has been contributing more on special teams, but I'm sure they'll both get plenty of carries tomorrow night. Obviously, Pollard and Spears are going to be the tandem with the running back situation, but you need a third guy. It's going to be Chestnut or Haskins. I'm interested to see how both of them do. I mean, that's a race. That's very much still up for grabs as to who's going to make the roster. We will see. I am also watching the Jacksons. The Jackson 2. Kieris and Jaquan Jackson. Who's going to, I mean, maybe Jaquan Jackson's taking a little bit of the edge in that race because he had such a good week of practice, but I still am not over that kick return Kieris had last week, so I'm watching that battle, see which guy kind of stands out at wide receiver and in the return game tomorrow night. And then I'm just kind of watching the defensively. I'm looking to see if some of those guys that really performed well last week can follow it up. I'm watching the Chance Campbells to see if Chance can kind of follow up that great performance he had against San Francisco with another one this week and kind of emerge. I'm assuming Otis Reese will get in there. I'm watching him because they need him to come on. I'm looking at these edge rush guys. Come on, especially if Arden Key is going to be out for 6 games. I'm looking to Rashad Weaver. I'm looking to Caleb Murphy. I'm looking at Harrell. I'm looking at all of these guys. Who's going to emerge? Who's going to emerge as the guy who can make plays? Because last week left something to be desired. I know Keandre Coburn had a big week last week. I would be watching for him to kind of follow that up, but I think he's hurt a little bit, so I don't know if he's going to play. Tavondre Sweat, I doubt he plays, but if so, I'm always eager to watch him. Jarvis Brownlee, I would be interested to watch him get some playing time. I wish Caleb Farley were playing. This would be a great opportunity for him, but unfortunately, he's hurt as well. So that's what I'm looking for tomorrow night. I'm looking at Malik. I'm looking at Kyle Phillips isn't going to be in there, so really wide receiver wise, you're looking at Mason Kinsey. You're looking at the Jacksons. And so we'll see who kind of emerges in that race between the Jacksons, the Chestnut Haskins battle. And somebody mentioned Cedric Gray. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know what's going on with Cedric Gray. That was a guy I was really excited about, 4th round pick, but he's hurt. He's I don't know what the deal is with him. We'll see. But I wish Cedric Gray were going to be in there, but I doubt it. But those are the guys I'm looking at tomorrow night. Cedric Gray apparently has a shoulder injury. Let me know in the comments below, who are you excited about watching tomorrow night? Obviously, starters out. So this is an opportunity for some of these guys to make their case to be on the practice squad, or some of them in the case of Chestnut, Haskins, the Jacksons, some of these guys to make their case that they need to be on the 53-man roster. It's an interesting opportunity. Maybe we'll get the starters back next week for the 3rd and final preseason game. I will be back Monday at 1 Eastern, noon Central, to recap whatever happens tomorrow night and to get an outlook on the final week of the preseason, because we are getting closer and closer and closer and closer to the regular season. It is almost here. I appreciate you guys joining me for the Two Tone Talk podcast today. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, be sure to go and watch some of these videos where I'm checking out these clips from the media showing their disrespect on the channel. If you're listening on Spotify or SoundCloud, I appreciate you as well. I will see you guys Monday at 1 Eastern, noon Central. Tighten up, everybody. Bye.